델타항공이 항공업 종목 중에서 가장 먼저 실적 발표 스타트를 끊었습니다. 이번 실적 시즌 분위기를 미리 알아볼 수 있어서 중요했는데 실적 발표 이후 급락했습니다. 10월 13일 종가 기준으로 5.7% 하락했습니다. 투자자분들의 우려가 많은 바 델타항공에 대해 짧게 코멘트 드리겠습니다. 실적 발표 내용이나 숫자 자체에는 크게 문제가 없었습니다. 수익성 지표들이 기대치보다 모두 좋게 나왔습니다. 세전이익은 예상치의 2배 수준인 2억 1,600만 불, 주당 이익도 시장 컨센서스의 2배 수준으로 발표되었지만 매출은 다소 기대치를 하회했습니다. 이런 어닝 서프라이즈에도 불구하고 주가는 하락하였는데 이번 하락은 유가 상승으로 항공유 비용 부담이 커졌기 때문에 투자 심리가 훼손된 것으로 해석합니다. 이번 실적 발표에서는 영업비용 부담 증가 우려로 월가 애널리스트의 질문들이 쏟아졌습니다. 실적 발표 내용을 요약해보면 경영진들은 투자자들의 질문에 대해서 대체적으로 긍정적인 톤으로 성실히 답변하였고 내년 봄여름까지 항공섹터 전반이 회복하는 시나리오에 대해서 꽤나 자신이 있는 모습입니다. 하지만 준비한 멘트 외에는 원론적인 답변을 반복하기도 했습니다. 예를 들면 투자자분들이 가장 궁금해하시는 항공섹터의 전반적인 회복 시기에 관련한 구체적인 사항은 12월의 투자자 행사 때에 더 많은 정보를 드리겠다며 완곡하게 답변했습니다. 실적 발표에서도 경영진이 명확하게 표현한 내용인데 최근 유가 상승과 인플레이션 환경에 대해 시장이 공감하고 있기 때문에 이제 델타는 운임을 상승할 수 있는 명분을 얻었습니다. 앞으로는 가격 인상을 통해 비용 부담을 소비자에게 전가시킬 수 있을 것으로 예상합니다. 또한 다음 달에 있을 항공업계 호재로는 이제 미국은 외국인들에 대해서 입국을 허용합니다. 단 11월 초 정도부터 백신 접종이 완료된 무증상자에 한해서입니다. 이는 국제선 매출에 상당한 부스터로 작용할 것입니다. 국제선 외에도 기업과 정부의 출장 수요가 늘어날 것으로 예상되며 델타는 비즈니스석 비중을 늘리는 프리미엄 전환 전략을 실행하고 있습니다. 직원을 이미 8,000여 명 증원하며 계속 늘어나는 여객 수요에 맞추어 잘 준비하고 있습니다. 결론적으로 델타항공의 급락을 설명할 수 있는 요인은 실적 발표 내용에서는 찾아보기 힘들었으며 주식시장의 불확실성과 투자 심리의 변화가 복합적으로 작용했다고 생각합니다. 델타의 내부자들은 2021년 5월부터 8월까지 자기 주식 매수를 한 것으로 확인되었고 델타의 여객 수요는 2019년 고점 대비 63% 수준까지 올라온 것으로 확인됩니다. 따라서 이번 하락은 크게 우려할 사항은 아니라고 판단합니다. 구조적으로 변화가 없고 앞으로의 펀더멘털도 개선될 것으로 예상되므로 장기적인 매수 관점을 유지합니다. 다만 현재 포트폴리오 수익이 많이 누적되고 있어 일부 비중은 차익 실현이 가능하다는 점 참고해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 종목 코멘트는 여기서 마치며 영상 말미에는 실제 실적 발표에서 나왔던 월스트리트 애널리스트들의 질문과 경영진의 답변을 정리하여 별도로 첨부해 두었습니다. 관심이 있으신 분들께서는 이어지는 실적 발표 원문을 참고하시길 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
And we'll go first to Jamie Baker with JP Morgan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. First question goes potentially to Glenn and Dan. So pre-COVID, I had asked Paul about the amount of time that it would typically take Delta to recalibrate to higher fuel prices. I'm not staring at the transcript, but his estimate at the time was 4 to 6 months, which was an improvement from historic levels. So my question, I guess, for Glenn is whether the booking curve is steep enough right now that you might actually be able to recapture the top line more quickly than that. And similarly for Dan, whether there's anything we should be thinking on the cost or operations side that could accelerate the process. I'm basically just trying to understand whether 4 to 6 months is still the right estimate for us to be using.
Well, I would just comment, I think we're a bit in uncharted territory here as the recovery continues. And while I think it might be difficult in the very short run, despite the fact that the booking curve has moved in a bit, that I would estimate that 4 to 6 months is about right because we believe that demand and capacity will fall back into a very good equilibrium by next spring, which would put you inside that window.
Okay. All right. So no structural changes that you can identify that would greatly alter it one way or the other then?
No, I think I would think that would be where we would expect it to manifest itself in the same window.
Okay, and then second question, just as it relates to the international demand that you're seeing from Europe since the Biden announcement, can you say how skewed the improvement is to the European point of sale? I'm just trying to reconcile some data that we have here that largely excludes Euro point of sale, just so trying to get a feel whether it's 70-30, 60-40, 80-20, something like that.
Well, that time of year is actually the winter season has more European sales than the summer season. So we're talking probably about more of a normal split of, if that's what you're asking, 60% U.S. origin, 40% European origin. And the interesting part about this is that we have seen an uptick in both sides, not just European sales. The assumption there is that there are a lot of Europeans in the U.S. that we're worried about getting back. So very nice uptick as we get to November and December beyond the 212F being lifted.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you, Glenn.
We'll go next to Brandon Oglinski with Barclays.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for taking the question. And Ed, you kind of answered it there, but I guess, Dan, is it still right to be thinking 2019 costs are the benchmark here, especially just given all the wage inflation that we're seeing across the economy?
Yeah, it's certainly a clear marker for us. We believe as we restore this airline, we'll be at or better than 2019 cost levels.
And so is that just literally a function of the network getting back to where you were utilizing it, pre-pandemic, especially with longer haul flying coming back?
Yeah, there's certainly, as we transition through this and we restore and get through the rebuild, that will dissipate. You bring back the capacity, you get that leverage. You also get the balance between the domestic and international. And then when you think about the more structural elements, the elements related to fleet simplification start to come through, and you get those benefits related to that, both in fuel and fuel efficiency and also in our operating costs.
Brandon, this is Ed. I can echo what Dan's saying. We've taken the opportunity over the last year to rebuild this airline back piece by piece, and we're learning a lot more about what we want to keep forward and retain and what parts of the business that we don't need to be retaining and some of the cost structure. And so there's efficiency, whether it's in catering, whether it's in our operational performance, literally every part, our G&A, every part of our operations. Hard to see when our capacity is still only at 80% or more at 2019 levels. But we are, very determined to make certain that we retain the value for the period of time we've just been through, and that efficiency will show through. It's going to take a little bit longer, and that's why it'll be really important in the Capital Markets Day that we show you the pathway to get there. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll go next to Catherine O'Brien with Goldman Sachs.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Maybe just one last follow-up on the cost outlook. So, I think you guys have made the point clear that we probably need to see more of an ASM recovery, not only in total amount of capacity deployed, but of course on the network allocation as well as you restore some of the longer haul wide-body flying. But I guess just if we could talk a little bit more about pace, like do we need to get to a full restoration for that to occur, or like going from 90% to 100% recovered, do we suddenly see like a real, acceleration in the leverage you're going to get across the business, or just any high-level comments on how to think about pacing as we approach that? Thanks.
We'll give you certainly more color and put a pin on it as we go to Capital Markets Day, give you the outlook, and also get more into specifics around 2022 guidance when we give you that. The real thing I think to look for is the two elements. It's going to be bringing down that rebuild cost related to the fleet, and when we get that restored. And that's going to really pace pretty closely with the return of capacity. And then obviously the incremental leverage. So I think on that piece, you're going to get it throughout that period of time, but it's really that getting that fleet rebuild component down. And that will happen as we progress through that period.
Okay, got it. And then maybe just one more international. So, Ed, on CNBC this morning, you noted that the company saw a tenfold increase in international bookings following the announcement on the U.S. borders a couple weeks ago. Can you just help us frame when we really start to see that momentum build in revenue? It sounds like there's some of that hitting in November, December timeframe, driving, your more optimistic outlook on those months versus October. But are there also any early indications maybe for next spring or summer? Would love just to hear when you think we're going to start to really see that show up in revenue a bit more. Thanks.
Sure, Katie. Yes, we're going to see it in November and December. We're looking at a 10-point recovery improvement just going from October to November. October, we're estimating at the 65% restoration level, which is where we've been for the last couple months, and we see a big jump up in November and December. International is a piece of that. It's not the only driver of that. Business travel is an important piece of that as we see that continuing to improve. We see in our bookings, I mentioned, I think, on the CNBC piece this morning that just in the last week, our cash sales were up 9% week over week, and that's a trend we've been seeing here for some period of time, steady growth. So I think you're going to see it then. I think like we saw here in the summer, there's going to be a mad rush for those that want to travel, that need to travel, to get out and travel. You may see a little bit of a pause as you get into the January, February time frame, but I think spring and summer is going to be another tick back up at an even higher level. And my view is that you're going to see, particularly for Europe, which is the biggest part of our international base, a spring summer next year that look very much like the spring summer we've just been through here in the U.S.
Great, thanks for that.
Next to David Vernon with Bernstein.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for taking the time. I wanted to ask the cost question slightly differently. The capacity is supposed to be down 80% for 4Q. Can you give us a sense for where the operating resources are relative to 2019 in the fourth quarter? I'm just trying to think about, how many crews and pilots and stuff do we have that we're working to produce the 2019 schedule in relation to this capacity being down sort of 20% level? Is it down in line with that? Is it down less than that? Can you help us kind of frame the productivity issue?
I'm not sure I fully understand the essence of the question in regards to, are you asking where the workforce is relative?
Yeah, so like productive capacity, right? If you had 100 people producing 100% last year, and now you're producing 80, do you have like 85% of the resource from 2019 producing that 80? Like, I'm trying to understand the deleveraging that's happened because of the pull down of capacity.
I think the way to think about it is when you think about productivity measures by group, as you restore, you're getting those productivity levels back and moving closer or beyond 2019. So that's whether it's in the airport, whether it's with catering or other types of activities, those progress as you bring that back. There's also situations where we're hiring ahead to ramp up. So those are the unproductive people. That's where you're training them, you're scaling them before you inject them into the operation. And that's why you call out the specifics associated there with the rebuild.
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to get a sense for if you could help us frame how the negative impact of the productivity loss.
Let me take a stab at this, David. We have a lot of premium pay, overtime, a lack of quote-unquote productivity given where we sit with a rapid rebuild of the airline, getting people in position, getting people ready for the future, as Dan said, just covering the operation. And so you have not only just more people than capacity relative to where we're eventually going to end up once our business is restored, but on top of that, you've got a higher level of added costs going into the current funnel to ensure that you're delivering great service and building for the future at the same time on a reduced base of capacity. So that's a big part of it. You also have the restoration costs and maintenance and training and other elements that are another layer. And I appreciate you can't see that in the numbers broken out as clearly. But again, these are the things we're going to talk about in December at the Capital Markets Day to show you the trend line. None of us have ever been through something like this, as disruptive as this, and as it builds back, I can appreciate the questions, but we see it maybe a little more clearly over a longer period of time than looking at it in the existing quarter.
Well, that's helpful. Thanks. If I could squeeze one more in there, Glenn, as you think about when we should be getting back to prior period load factors, are you expecting the airline to kind of get back to that high 80s level in 22, 23? Like, how should we think about load factor recovery?
Yeah, I think this summer we were running load factors that were within a couple points of 2019 levels. So I would expect by next spring and summer that the industry would be back in that zone.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
We'll go next to Mike Lindenberg with Deutsche Bank.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Dan, can you just walk through kind of the primary elements on the net debt going from $19 billion to $22 billion QN to December quarter, and I guess seasonality probably plays a role there?
Well, when you think about it, there's really three components related to it. One will be you work right through the elements of free cash flow and the movements, right? It's earnings. It's ultimately the movement in working capital, which is the air traffic liability. Mm-hmm. And then it's ultimately CapEx. So you have the guidance framework as it relates to the earnings framework. CapEx, we've told you, is 3.2 for the year, gross CapEx. We're $2 billion year to date, so that implies 1.2 in the fourth quarter. And then you also have the working capital movement, which is really the air traffic liability. And normally in a period of time like this, when you think about that might move in a more seasonal, traditional time in the low teens. But as we talked about throughout this call, we're not necessarily in traditional seasonal periods of time. So we would expect that to be slightly more muted than that as it relates to movement from it. But those are really the drivers there.
Great, very helpful. And then just second question to Glenn. What percent of your revenue is actually tied to government contracts? I mean, I know we have CRAF and, we have, the GSA City Pair program, and then obviously you recently moved the Afghan people. And I realize maybe the revenue number is a small component. I guess when you think about some of the good press that you've gotten from some of your government services, you sort of have to weigh that as well. So sort of a multi-pronged kind of ask on that piece of your business. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, this is Ed. I'll take a stab at that since I was asking the same question the other day. And you've got to look at it at a 2019 level, not necessarily at today's level, because government travel is way down, given where the federal government is largely not open. When you go to D.C., a lot of the offices, people aren't out on the road yet. But it's collectively in the hundreds of millions of dollars for Delta on an annual basis. When you consider, charters, you consider all the federal workers that do travel on Delta. We have a pretty significant share of those. When you consider the U.S. mail that we carry, it's a pretty large revenue base.
Very good.
We'll now go to our final analyst question.
And we'll go to Ravi Shankar with Morgan Stanley.
Great. Thanks for putting me in. A couple of follow-ups here. The 75% recovered for November and December. I just want to understand if that's what the booking curve is telling you now, or is that a number that you are extrapolating based on the current rate of improvement? I'm just trying to understand kind of if things continue to get better here over the next 6 to 8 weeks, if you can end up with a better than 75% recovered number for November and December.
Well, clearly it's both. It's what we have on hand and what we expect to get. So it's the combination of those two.
Okay, got it. And just to follow up on the strong mix that you're seeing in the premium cabin, you said that was structural. Do you see that evidence in the surveys you're doing with people post flying? Kind of like what's the evidence of that? And B, once corporate and international fully come back, let's say this time next year, do you expect to be flying more premium seats than in 2019 if this bounce you're seeing is truly structural?
Yeah, I think both of those we're intending on answering at Investor Day is to show you how we see this evolving and show you all the research behind why we're confident that more premium seats is the direction we want to head.
델타항공 주가 하락에는 크게 이유가 없어 보입니다. 과도한 하락은 오히려 추가 매입의 기회로 삼으시길 바랍니다. 오늘의 종목 노트를 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.